looked at his work, and we both agreed that there was a gravitas to it, and a strength and legitimacy that took it, way beyond what people are out there, cranking out abstractly. So that was how we found him. He's been a friend of the gallery and comes to shows and has been in touch. And so here we are. We're very, very proud of this show. We think it's a very strong show, and we're pleased to present it. So here we go.
Thank you, John. It was a great introduction, and I am very pleased to be here. This gallery is excellent, and just being part of the life of you and Carol is excellent. And I'll never forget that the 2 times that you visited my studio, Carol's just, her enthusiasm is just overwhelming. I was very taken by that and appreciative of it. So anyhow, I guess we could have a debate, John and I, abstract versus representational. But we do agree on one thing. I think everybody in our art agrees that at the core of every painting is abstraction, which is the basic formal aspects of art making. So I am going to get into that, and we're going to talk about my work and so forth, but I want to get something out of the way. When I talk about the a lot of people say, encaustic. What in heaven's name is encaustic? So I brought a few items to kind of give you some tangible thought about encaustic before we go any further. Encaustic is hot wax, okay? So how do we do this stuff? I'm not going to actually do a demo or anything like that. And if you came here to learn how to do it, you're not going to learn how to do it. A lot of, if I can get this back, first of all. Okay, so, where do you get the colors? We get encaustic in all colors. I just grabbed a couple chunks from my studio before I left. So this is the way it's sold. Or an artist can make the stuff themselves by simply buying wax. Beeswax is the basic component. There's other waxes added to make it hard. And then you put pigment in it. And then to make it work, one has to heat it up. So we put it on a hot plate. I didn't bring a hot plate. But this is a brush that's been used with encaustic. So we use the cheapest, crappiest brushes that you can possibly buy because I'm going to pass this around so you can see what it is. However, so when we start painting, we just put this on a hot plate or in a little tin of liquefied wax, and it becomes like a regular brush. But you don't have to clean it up when you're done. It's just stays in this form until you're ready to use it. So I'll just pass that around and get an idea of. It's a different thing. So a lot of people say, it'd be fun to just do this once in a while. It's not fun to do this once in a while. It really isn't. It's only fun if you actually are familiar with it enough that it's good, because it doesn't flow. It's like if you're an oil painter, you're used to it. It's really fluid. Even acrylic is fluid. But when you get into this wax, you go like this, oops, it's getting hard. It's not working anymore. So we have like a heat gun in one hand and a brush that's loaded, and we're keeping it warmed up, and we're moving along. We use torches, aromatic torches, and we also use irons. I brought a little one along. I also use real big irons too, but this, just plug this in, it heats up. It's my fault. I told people artists, but they're very bad on stuff. So this is a little iron where you can move stuff around a little bit. It's very compatible with oil. It's incompatible with acrylic. Very compatible with watercolor, gouache, charcoal drawings, all that, everything else. Just acrylic, because acrylic is like a plastic when it's hard, so the wax won't stick to it properly. Okay, I don't have to pass this around. You guys know what this is. All right, so that you have some idea of what we're doing. But it's not really about the technique. And Libby and I have actually moved away from teaching encaustic a lot, because the issue is not usually the technical thing. The issue is art. You know, is the art working or is the art not working? And the encaustic is just another way of making it work or not work. Can we get all set up here? Sorry about these early stuff. So, by the way, we passed around a couple books, one of which is my autobiography that I wrote for my 40-year retrospective at the university, at the Westchester University. Actually, it was at Villanova University. What?
Tell me the title.
Well, the title is I Never Owned a Lawnmower. I'm not going to talk about that too much. But you can't do everything in life. That's why it's titled that way, in case you're wondering. You have to give up something to get something. So I was working full-time as a dentist and half-time as an artist. There was just so many things you can do in life in a day. Okay, so the question is, the first question that I asked myself, why art? Why did I ever get involved in art? Because as a young person, we just played ball 24/7. That's all I can tell you. We were not cultured. We were. Oh, my mother did try and get us to play music. My mother was a great pianist and played Chopin quite a bit. So I'm still very fond. When I hear a Polonaise, I get a little warmer feeling than that.
Did you grow up around here?
No, I grew up, and by the way, this is an interactive conversation. So, now this may cause me to go off on some tangent, but I could care less. So, just interrupt me at will, not you can.
I just wanted to say, there's a reason you use a crappy brush. If you use synthetic, it'll just melt. You have to use hairbrush. So hairbrushes go from $2 to $150. So you get the cheap ones. I
grew up in Northeast Philadelphia, and so there were I had 10 friends my age that lived on 1 or 2 blocks in that range, and we just would gather up and talk sports, play sports, watch sports. Sports still a big thing in my life, I have to tell you. I play tennis to this very day and love it, and watch sports, so it's still a big thing. So how did art come in? I didn't even read a lot of books when I was in high school. My very dear friend Harris, who now lives in Miami, used to take pride in that we didn't study a lot. I'm not bragging about it. It wasn't a good thing. And I did have my comeuppance when I got to college. So I had to get straightened out. So but when I did get to college, I found out about literature. And I was just crazy about it. I just started reading. I wasn't even studying my workload. I discovered all these great writers, and I was going through the classics like crazy. So this was inside me. It just hadn't been tapped and so forth. Okay, so in fact, at one point I tried to write a novel, but I found that's actually pretty hard to do. I did try music, so that called my mother did try. I played piano a little bit. I played the trumpet a little bit. Later in life, I tried to play I still do play the drums because it's all to do is go back. I can do that a little bit. So I'm a failure in music, actually. One of my teachers, Lenny Seidman, who runs the Painted Bride, he said, "How you doing?" I said, No, he says, how much you practice? I said, about 5 minutes a week. He said, really? He said, that much? He says, that's not good. So I didn't become a great tabla player. But art, when I started doing art, it was like I could get ensconced in my studio for days, and I would be very happy, and I can just work there endlessly. So I guess you just have to find what it is that kind of excites your life, and when you find it, that's really great. I didn't think I could draw. A lot of people have this, I hear this all the time. All my friends, I can't draw. I know some teacher in elementary school said, you know, that doesn't look like a good tree. That's not a good tree, or something like that. That was very common. I don't think that goes on so much today. And I'm very annoyed with the little kids today. Very annoyed. You go in to see a show of 12-year-olds and the work is fabulous. They are really good. Because no one told them that they're not artists. They believe they're artists. But we did. And so although we played ball all the time, one of my friends did go to art school. He was the roughest and humblest guy of all. Went to art school. I remember I was in dental school at the time. I said, you know, I wish, and I started also have this big interest in going to art museums all the time. I said, I wish I could draw, but I can't. He said, well, you can. He says, I'm going to give you a lesson. I said, all right. So we went back to his apartment, and he set up a still life, and he sort of gave me a little guidance. And I left there with a drawing. That very day, it was, and I said, oh my God, just like one shot and you can draw. So that, I always say this, that you can all do this. And for the people here who think they can't draw or they can't do art, you can. You absolutely can. So that I wasn't able to follow through on that in any way. I was probably in my mid-20s or early 20s at that time. But later on in life, I was working very hard. As a new professional man, I was working a lot of hours the first 10 years of my dental practice. And Libby Soffer, that's my wife, who was very interested in art always. Well, that was another thing. I always found that I liked women who liked art. So that was, I don't know how that played in exactly, but I think it played in. Because of sports and women, and then art and literature came in. So, I'm really, I cut this off 3 times. I don't believe it. How is that possible? The same guy keeps calling.
Sicilian insurance policy.
How is it wrong? Annoyed if any of you left your phones. Okay, so Libby found a class for me to take at the Wallingford Arts Center. We live near Media. And it was on Saturday afternoons. I said, well, I can't. I work. She said, well, you'll pick off on Saturday afternoons. And you go there for class for fathers and children. So I went with my son. And it was for working in clay, which I loved immediately, instantaneously. Loved working in clay. And I also recommend that for people who are looking for an entree to the art world. I think working in clay is one of the great entrees. It's very malleable, and you can make stuff almost immediately. And I did have some very good success. I had a tremendous teacher. I always have to stop and pay homage to Shirley Cassencourt, who was a great artist and a great teacher, and I was very fortunate to have her as my first art teacher. So my son didn't continue with art, but I did. I kept studying, and after about 6 years, I woke up one day and realized I didn't really know anything. So I come from, I was a science major in college and all that, so I come from a point of view of trying to know stuff. as well as just work from your gut. So I was working from my gut for about 6 years and doing pretty well.
Doing encaustics?
Doing clay.
Just the paint?
Yeah, we're talking a long time ago, back in the 1800s. When I first started. So, I was doing, and I wondered, I said, I'd like to know what's this art thing is all about. So I went down to University of the Arts in Philly. I took a class in color and design. And that has really helped me in good stead. I spent like a year studying that. I always find that a lot of people who are struggling with their art, a real struggle with their art, let's be honest about that. And that's what makes it exciting. But we discovered, Libby and I discovered, that it seems that art fails or doesn't succeed at a high level because the basics are not tended to like they should. So when we started teaching workshops, we call it the Art Incubator Workshop, we really focus on the basics of art. And not some tricky thing like if you use this special interference color here, you're going to get something that's knock everybody's socks off. It won't. What knocks people's socks off is if you get the color and the composition right. And then we also have another thing that we talk about a lot, and that is concept. I do believe that if you have something to say, that it actually is more important art. So I'm always working with a concept. And I did that intuitively. So I was working with clay, and I didn't remember when about writing a novel was to write about yourself, write about something you know. So when I started doing clay, and this was just at a local art center, we were just having fun. I thought, well, what do I know? At the time, I was president of our synagogue and very involved in Judaism. And I thought, well, I'm going to do stuff that revolves with like Jewish ritual objects, like a candelabra or a thing's called a mezuzah that goes on the doorpost. My name is Soffer, which in Hebrew means scribe. And my aunt used to always say that we're related to Ezra the scribe. I don't think there's anyone here who can refute that. So, I don't know if we're related to Ezra. Anyhow, I had a lot of fun, and I had a lot of success with that. Actually, I should tell you that I was discovered by a 9-year-old boy. My son's boyfriend came over, and I was like puttering around in our basement at the time. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm making mezuzahs, and it's just Jewish stuff." He says, "Oh," he says, "well, my mother's putting this exhibition on. It's going to be a major exhibition of Jewish ritual objects at the Balch Institute, which doesn't exist now, but was a sensational small museum in Philadelphia that ran out of money." So, he said, "Would you like to be in it?" I said, I'm a dentist, I mess around with this a little bit, it's just a hobby, I don't know. So I said, all right, I guess so. And I was in it, and then it so happened that people from the University of Pennsylvania folk art department came to the show. They loved what I was doing. I was working in raku a lot, and I was doing these objects in raku, which hadn't been seen very much. So they started inviting me to shows and so forth. And eventually, Libby and I have each had a one-person show at the Jewish Museum in Philadelphia. That same year, I get, how did I learn about to become art? We went away every summer. Instead of taking a vacation at the beach, we would take an art workshop for a week or two, someplace around the country. And we still do that in our life, except we're the teachers now. we're the students for years and years. And my class fell through. So I was taking a class at Parsons, summer class at Parsons, and it fell through. And we were looking around, and we finally found a class at Bennington College. And but it was only 1 week was going to be clay. First week, there was no clay classes. And there was an abstract painting class. I said, all right, I'll do that. Maybe I'll learn something about glazing or something. And then I fell in love with abstract painting and divorced clay. That's my object of work, much as I loved it. But I did, things are still in my head about clay. I still love clay and the look of it. There is a piece here, and I asked everyone to pay attention to it for a little bit. It means a lot to me. It's a clay painting. It's actually done, it's a painting done with clay and then sealed. And it refers, to my love of that work. So when and then I started taking classes with different art teachers. I remember I studied with a guy, Mo Brucker, who's very color-oriented artist. And he used to say to me, Alan, can you do a little more color in your work? And I said, well, I come from doing this like stoneware pottery, and kind of muted and soft, elegant in that way. But I'll try. So he finally pushed me. He is a very pushy sort of guy, a good friend. I say that lovingly. And I'm a pushy teacher too, by the way, because I believe in that. I think that's how you get good students. You push them. So anyhow, that's how I got into painting. That's how I got into painting. Just accidentally. And it just seems that so often that great things happen accidentally. And I was painting figures, because that's what it's sort of like when you take clay, they have you making little bowls and cut. You do the things that are rudimentary. So part of learning art, we do figurative work and so forth. And I'm still very proud of the fact that I got first place in the in-person show at the Wallingford Art Center. But I was losing interest in doing figurative work and representational work for a couple of reasons. First of all, for me, I found that the worrying about getting it right, getting the proportions right, seemed to be detracting from the painting, the painterliness of the painting. And so that was one reason that I was moving away. The other reason was I had spent my whole life doing meticulous work in dentistry within microns of failure or success. And I just didn't want to be spending the rest of my life being so detail-oriented. So I had my swan song of representational work. I actually had it right here in Westchester and River City, and at the Chester County Art Association in 2005. I got all my best paintings together in the representational world and put them up there, and I said, bye-bye, that's it, no more. And I still, what I do occasionally, and in fact I just did this last month a couple of times, I go back and I'll do some drawing, representational drawing. Now I always push representational painters. I say, your path to better representational work may well be by doing some abstract painting. It may be there. My work as an abstract painter is definitely informed and helped by doing representational drawings. So one of Libby's cohorts, where she has her studio, he's a very good representational painter. He brings in a model every now and then. So I go over there and I do that. And just by the way, if you don't do it, you lose it. You just do. So it was I find that very helpful, and I like that crossover. Because when you're making marks, they don't come out of nowhere. If they come out of nowhere, you can tell like an amateur, the marks are just not very graceful. They're not very interesting. They're not attractive. They're just sort of clumsy, klutzy marks. So I think by doing some representational work, it gets the mark making much better. And so we've, in our workshops, we've developed some systems for pushing people to learn how to do mark making also without doing representational work. But it is an issue in abstraction, the kind of marks that you make. It's a very big issue. Another thing that has happened later in life here, well, before I get into that, you all know that I'm an abstract expressionist painter. That's, if you said, what's Alan Soffer? He's an abstract expressionist painter. Excuse me. What that means? Yes, that's what it means. So I am drawing my work from my unconscious or subconscious. I've never been sure which is what's the difference between those two things. If anyone knows, I'm open to having that elucidated. So, and why would I bother doing it? And so many other people, you can drive down the street and you can take a picture of a beautiful landscape and you can go back to your studio and you can transfer that beautiful picture to a painting. For me, a big part of working from my unconscious is that I discover who I am. I really discover who I am. When you work from this photograph, or from so-called real life, let's say a model, you're not discovering who you are as much. We can debate that if you want, John. But when you're working from your unconscious, what's coming out is just your own stuff, unfiltered, spontaneous as possible, working in an unconscious way. When it's going the best, it's almost a dreamlike state.
Do you listen to music?
I do listen to music.
Does the music influence what you paint?
The music, I'm glad you asked that. You're just away, and a guy said to me, are you interested, influenced by sound? We meant music. Harry Chapin's music influences me. I did a whole thing called All My Life's a Circle. It's one of his famous songs. And I play music while I'm working. Sometimes I'm actually kind of dancing a little bit while it's going on. I'm not doing the Jackson Pollock dance, but I'm doing the Alan Soffer shuffle. Yeah.
You sort of just answered my question, but so is that where the tie with Joseph Campbell comes into your work?
Yeah. Joseph Campbell, I didn't get to Joseph Campbell. I have a lot of stuff to talk about here. So Joseph Campbell came into our life in 1988 or 9. I'm not sure which. He was, if you don't know who he is, he's a very famous professor of mythology at Sarah Lawrence University. And Bill Moyers interviewed him on television. I've read some of his books. He's a mediocre writer. Hero with 1,000 Faces was probably his most successful book. But the writing was not great. But Bill Moyers, he just brought out the best of this guy. I was so taken with it, and so were others, that we organized a study group around Joseph Campbell. And we would get together once a month at someone's house, listen to the interview tapes. And and it had a big impact on my life. I still say that Joseph Campbell is my mentor, still is. He changed my life. I love dentistry, but everyone thinks, oh, he's so happy to get out of dentistry. He must have hated dentistry. I love dentistry. I like working with people. I like doing the technical stuff. It was challenging. Dan, would you agree it was challenging? It was challenging. So it was fun. It was semi-scientific, quasi-scientific at times, but it was, we always say, the art and science. It's not hard, it's not real hard science. But it was very interesting work. But I fell in love, like I divorced Clay and married Penny. I felt I had to divorce my work in dentistry. And Joseph Campbell's famous line is, find your bliss and do that with your life. And I did. I made a break after I thought my sons were through their training as whatever they do. So you're busy, you're working, right? You have a break.
Yes.
Good. It's encouraging. You know, he's going to support me in my own day. So, because this art thing is not that lucrative. Just in case you're thinking to leave your job to make a fortune doing this. Just wanted to warn you. Yes?
So do you, in addition to music, do you have a departure point, like where you jump off for each piece? In other words, is it a color that you feel, or a shape that you're drawn to, or a title? Or usually do you start with something?
I do, especially with encaustic. Not as much with acrylic or oil. I do work a lot in acrylic. Probably now 80–90% encaustic the last 10–12 years, but before that I worked mostly with acrylics. I sometimes start with a photograph. I do a lot of photographing, and I'll maybe use a piece of it, a little hunk of it as a collage to start. It may be totally buried at the end. It may not be visible, but I'll use that sometimes. Sometimes I'll do a little sketch, not very fancy because it's not what I want, but I'll do just a little wash of something, a line drawing, just to kind of get going. With encaustic, it's just to do too much playing around. First of all, it's very expensive stuff. Secondly, it's just a lot of time to put in, and just to have to scrape it all off and dump it. It's just, it hasn't worked for me to be quite as spontaneous with that. So I do like to start with something like that. I don't start with the music, but you did say something that I do use. And I learned this from the first class that I ever took. And she said, what I want you to do is to just kind of get your little quiet spot and try to feel some colors that you feel connected to in this very moment. And I do that to this day. That's the way I work. And I might be thinking, like if I'm in my blue period, and I'm doing blue, but by the time I get to the studio that morning or afternoon, I do also work late at night, have sort of strange work habits. I try and work around tennis if I can. Sports is a big thing in my life. So I might play tennis in the afternoon and then play some art in the morning, tennis, and then after dinner, if I'm really involved, I might go down at 8 or 9 o'clock at night and work till 1, 2 in the morning. It's an odd lifestyle, but it works for me. Now, usually I don't plan to work till 1 or 2 in the morning. The way it works is this. Around 11:30, 12, I want to wrap it up. So as I'm trying to wrap it up, I look at the piece I'm working on. I may be working on a couple pieces at once, but there's one major piece, one that's just sort of in the final stage. And I look at it and I say, You're a painter. She's a
And
painter.
then that's it.
We've all the painters are painters. You change one little thing.
And that's it.
That's a mistake. There's some error. This is a bad part of the paint. You change that one little thing, and then I stop. Uh-oh. No good. Now it's ruined 10 other things. And the next thing I know, that constant little, I'll just do one more thing. It's like 2 in the morning. Just putzing around with this one little thing. Yes?
But then how do you know ultimately when to stop, period? Piece is done.
The second class I ever taught, the teacher got behind me. I'm going to have to shoot you, I think. I'm going to answer this question first, though. Here's how, I have a whole, somebody wrote a whole piece on this in one of the art journals. By the way, I read art journals just like I read dental journals. And I find it very unusual that many of my artist friends don't have the foggiest idea what's going on in the art world outside of their own little bailiwick. But I would recommend highly that you subscribe to a couple of the art magazines that are out there. There's plenty of them. And not just the ones where they give you a list of, this was my palette for doing this. I don't recommend them highly after you get past the beginner stage. What were we talking about again?
How do you know when to stop?
How do you know when to stop? Here's Alan Soffer's knowing when to stop. The first thing is I have to eliminate the things that aren't working. We don't say the things that are bad or pretty bad. In the art world, we say what's working and what's not working. And you get to know that. And it's hard to be your own critic. It's harder to be a self-critic that you can walk around and criticize Alan Soffer's work easily. But your own work, it's much harder to criticize your own work. I know you tried to call me, oh look who's here. I'm glad you made it. So okay, let's say it's now 2 in the morning and I eliminated all this stuff. Am I done? Maybe. So the next day I come down and I look at it. And all right, I look at it. And then the next day I come down, I look at it, and I say, it's all working, but it's uninspiring. It's just not exciting. It's not powerful. I don't want to produce anything anymore that isn't really the best I can do. So if it's not the best I can do, unless I'm going to just say it's horrible, but throw it in the trash can, I'm going to have to now plunge into it. In order to make it really terrific, that's now you have to go in and wreck this thing that was working. So I always say art takes courage. It really does. It takes a lot of courage, and most adults don't have much courage when it comes to art. They might have courage in other ways, but they're scared to death to do art because someone's going to look at it, that teacher from elementary school who puts it down, and that's sort of that baggage that you're carrying around, and that's someone, it could be your spouse, is going to say, it's crappy. Or whatever. They usually don't.
I never say crappy.
Yeah, well, you don't say crappy. You just say, well, we have, when two artists live together, you have constant flow back and forth. So, and we're very honest with each other. We love each other, but we can be direct.
I always say I'm your toughest critic.
You are a tough critic.
Yeah.
But I've learned a lot from you. So it has to fulfill those two things. The first step is I have to get rid of everything that is not working in the painting, at least in my opinion. And the second thing is after looking at it for several days at a time. Now I'm going to tell you my secret to evaluating the painting. And there are different, people have different ways. A lot of people use a mirror. I don't know if there are people that use this. And you look in the mirror with your at the painting.